What if everything you've mastered is exactly what's destroying you? What if 45 years of discipline has built a prison so perfect you can't even see the bars anymore? What if the answer isn't learning more but forgetting everything? Kyoto, Japan. 1612, a private dojo. Dawn light cutting through morning mist. An old master stands in the center of a training hall. 63 years of age. 147 victories in mortal combat. Not a single defeat in his entire career. His students kneel in perfect rows around him. 80 warriors who've dedicated their lives to learning his methods. He calls forward his best student, a man of 30 who's trained for 15 years under this master's ruthless perfection. They bow, they take positions, they begin. The student attacks with flawless technique exactly as taught. Overhead strike, perfect angle, optimal speed. The master parries with the classical counter exactly as prescribed in ancient texts. The exchange lasts 17 seconds. Every movement textbook perfect. Every response predetermined by forms created centuries ago. The master wins. He always wins. But here's what nobody sees. He feels nothing. No satisfaction. No pride. No sense of accomplishment. Just a void that grows larger with each perfect victory. The student bows, grateful for the lesson. The master dismisses the class, and as 80 perfectly disciplined warriors file out in synchronized silence, the master stands alone in his immaculate dojo and realizes something terrifying. I've spent 45 years building perfection, and perfection has killed everything alive inside me. This is the story of Yamamoto Kenshin, the warrior who had everything a master could want and discovered it was all a cage. The man who achieved absolute discipline and found it had become absolute death. This isn't a story about building discipline. You already know how to do that. This is about what happens when discipline itself becomes the obstacle, when perfect control creates perfect emptiness, when the structures you built to protect yourself become the prison you must escape. And if you've ever felt this, if you've ever achieved what you thought you wanted and felt hollow instead of whole, then this story is for you. And now the story begins. Japan in 1612 exists in a strange twilight. The age of warring states. The Sengoku Jidai ended 12 years ago, when Tokugawa Ieyasu unified the nation through military genius and political ruthlessness. For the first time in over a century, the country knows sustained peace. But peace brings an identity crisis for the samurai class for generations. These warriors existed for one purpose: combat. They trained from childhood to kill efficiently, to endure suffering stoically, to die with honor when necessary. War was their profession, their meaning, their entire reason for existence. And now, no wars, no battles, no purpose. The Tokugawa shogunate needs a different kind of samurai now. Bureaucrats in warriors' clothing, administrators who maintain order through intimidation rather than violence, political instruments of control rather than battlefield chaos. This transformation is happening everywhere, except in certain places where old masters cling to the old ways, training warriors for conflicts that will never come again. Yamamoto Kenshin's dojo is one such place, located in Kyoto's eastern district, where Higashiyama Mountains loom like sleeping guardians. The compound occupies half an acre of manicured discipline. Every surface gleams. Every weapon hangs in precise arrangement. Every student moves with synchronized precision that makes visiting observers uncomfortable, because humans aren't supposed to move that way. That level of uniformity requires individual personality to be systematically erased. Kenshin practices Shinkage-ryu, the new shadow school of swordsmanship, founded in the mid-1500s by Koizumi Eyes no Kome. This style revolutionized Japanese sword combat by emphasizing timing and distance over brute strength. Where other schools taught warriors to overpower opponents, Shinkage-ryu taught them to manipulate perception, to exploit psychological weaknesses, to win before the actual clash of blades. It's sophisticated, cerebral, deadly in the hands of someone who truly understands it, and Kenshin understands it better than anyone. Alive. He began training at 18, already late by traditional standards. But what he lacked in early start, He compensated with obsessive dedication. While other students practiced forms for an hour, Kenshin practiced for 6. While others memorized 10 techniques, Kenshin memorized 100. While others trained 5 days weekly, Kenshin trained daily for 45 years without missing a single session. He became a machine, a human embodiment of technical perfection. His reputation spread through Japan. Lords sent their sons to train under him. Other masters came to challenge him and left defeated. His students won tournaments across the country. The name Yamamoto Kenshin became synonymous with absolute mastery. But mastery came with a hidden cost. Every spontaneous impulse suppressed. Every moment of authentic response replaced with programmed technique. Every opportunity for genuine presence sacrificed for perfect execution of memorized patterns. Kenshin trained himself so completely that he automated his own existence. Wake at the same hour, eat the same breakfast, walk the same path, teach the same forms, react with the same responses, day after day, year after year, decade after decade, until one spring morning when perfection finally cracked. It happened during that sparring session with Tanaka. The movements unfolded exactly as they always did: attack, parry, counter, victory. But in the moment of winning, Kenshin saw something that made his perfectly controlled breathing falter. He saw himself reflected in Tanaka's eyes, not the external image. Something deeper. He saw the deadness his own discipline had created. The way Tanaka executed perfect technique with a face that showed no joy, no passion, no authentic engagement with the moment. Just mechanical execution of programming downloaded through years of repetitive drilling. I didn't create a warrior. I created a robot wearing human skin. And worse, Kenshin realized he'd done the same thing to himself first. The realization struck like a blade finding an undefended opening. 45 years, 147 victories, 80 devoted students, a legacy that would be remembered for generations. And he felt empty. Not tired, not depressed, empty. Like a perfectly constructed building with nobody living inside. All structure, no life. All form, no essence. Class dismissed, he said abruptly, voice rougher than intended. The students bowed and exited with their usual synchronized precision. No questions, no hesitation. Perfect obedience that suddenly felt like the saddest thing Kenshin had ever created. Alone in his dojo, surrounded by weapons that had tasted blood. Surrounded by a reputation that made grown men bow. Surrounded by everything he'd spent his entire adult life building. Yamamoto Kenshin stood perfectly still and allowed himself to feel the truth he'd been avoiding for years. This isn't mastery. This is a very sophisticated form of suicide. Section 2, The Crack in the Armor. 1,000 words. That afternoon, Lord Matsudera summoned Kenshin to the castle. The Lord was one of the Tokugawa shogunate's senior administrators, a man who traded his sword for a brush, violence for bureaucracy. He'd survived the transition from war to peace by understanding what the new era required. Control, not courage. Yamamoto-sensei, Matsudera said with elaborate respect, Japan has changed. We need masters like you to preserve the old disciplines while adapting to new realities. Your students are famous for their precision, their obedience, their unwavering discipline. Kenshin bowed properly. I am honored to serve. The shogunate wants to establish formal training standards, unified methods across all sword schools. Your Shinkage-ryu techniques could become the foundation. Matsudera paused, choosing words carefully. We need warriors who follow orders perfectly, who never question, who execute commands with absolute reliability. Your dojo produces exactly this. Something in Kenshin's chest constricted. Perfect soldiers, perfect servants, perfectly dead inside. I will consider this honor carefully, my lord. Asterisk. Walking back through Kyoto's evening streets, Kenshin felt the constriction tighten. The shogunate wanted to mass-produce what he'd created, to turn his methods into official doctrine, to systematize the death of spontaneity across an entire nation. He'd become an architect of spiritual extinction instead of returning to his compound. Kenshin's feet carried him east. toward the forest edge where civilization met wilderness, where order touched chaos, where the controlled world ended and something unpredictable began. He sat on a fallen log as sunset painted the sky in bleeding colors. For the first time in decades, Yamamoto Kenshin did something absolutely forbidden for a master of his caliber. He allowed himself to not know what to do. No technique for this situation, no form prescribed by ancient masters, no memorized response, just confusion, genuine, raw, terrifying confusion, and in that confusion something shifted. He returned to the forest edge the next evening, and the next, breaking his sacred routine, disrupting his perfect schedule, sitting in stillness without formal meditation technique, without prescribed posture, without knowing what he was seeking. On the third evening, he found someone else there. An old monk, perhaps 70 years, though age seemed irrelevant to him, sat on a flat rock by a small stream, simple grey robes, weathered face. But his eyes held something Kenshin hadn't seen in his own mirror for 45 years. Joy, not happiness dependent on circumstances, just fundamental joy at being alive. Forgive the interruption, venerable monk, Kenshin said with proper respect. I didn't realize this place was occupied. The monk looked up, smiling. The forest belongs to no one. Sit if you wish. Kenshin sat, maintaining perfect posture out of ingrained habit. Back straight, hands properly positioned, breathing controlled. They sat in silence for several minutes. Then the monk spoke. Your Yamamoto Kenshin, the perfect master, 147 victories, never defeated, never broken, never questioned. You know of me. Everyone knows of you. The monk paused. Tell me, Kenshin-san, are you happy? The question struck like a punch, finding the solar plexus. Happiness is not the purpose of the warrior's path. Kenshin replied automatically the answer he'd given students 1,000 times. Then what is the purpose? Discipline, mastery, service, honor. And you have all these things? Yes. Then why? The monk asked gently. Do you come here every evening looking like a man who's lost something he can't name? Kenshin's perfect composure cracked, just slightly, but enough. I have everything I trained for, he said quietly. Everything tradition demands, but I feel nothing. My students execute techniques perfectly. My discipline never wavers. My legacy is secure. He paused, admitting what he'd never spoken aloud. And I feel empty. The monk nodded as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Do you know what Shoshin means, Kenshin-san? Beginner's mind. It's a basic Zen concept. Then tell me, when was the last time you experienced it? Kenshin opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. When had he last approached anything with genuine curiosity, with openness to discovery, with the wonder of not knowing? 45 years ago, he whispered, when I was a student, and now I know everything, every technique, every form, every response to every situation. There are no surprises, no discovery, just execution of accumulated knowledge. The monk picked up a stone and tossed it into the stream. It disrupted the water's smooth flow, creating ripples that changed the entire surface. Shoshin, the monk said, is not just for beginners. It's the essence of presence itself. The moment you believe you know everything, you stop being present with what actually is. You're only present with your memories, your expectations, your rigid patterns. He stood, preparing to leave. Wait, Kenshin said. Who are you? Just a wandering monk. He smiled. But if you truly want to understand what I'm saying, meet me here tomorrow evening. Bring your sword. Let me show you something that will either free you or destroy you. As the monk disappeared into the forest shadows, Kenshin sat with a sensation he hadn't felt in decades: uncertainty. And beneath it, fragile as new bamboo shoots, the first stirring of something that might be called life. Section 3, The 7 Days of Death, 1,000 words. The next evening, Kenshin arrived early. Discipline demanded punctuality. The monk was already there, as if he'd never left. You came, the monk observed. You invited me. No, I offered. You chose. That distinction matters more than you. Understand. The monk gestured to an open clearing among the trees. Draw your sword. Kenshin unsheathed his blade. Perfect weapon maintained with perfect care for 40 years. The steel caught fading sunlight like captured moonlight. Now, the monk said calmly, "Attack me. I cannot strike an unarmed monk. I didn't say strike me. I said attack me. Show me your perfect technique, your flawless forms, everything you've mastered." Kenshin moved into classical Shinkage-ryu opening stance. He'd performed this position 10,000 times. His body knew every micro-adjustment without conscious thought. He executed a basic overhead strike. Textbook perfect. Precise. Controlled. The monk didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just watched again. He said, "Faster this time." Kenshin attacked. Multiple strikes. Each one perfect. Each one exactly as the ancient masters prescribed. Each one cutting empty air because the monk simply stood there, observing. "Do you know what I see?" The monk asked. "I see a man performing quite beautiful, precise, and completely disconnected from this present moment. These are movements you memorized decades ago. You're not here now, responding to me, to this environment, to this exact instant. You're executing pre-programmed responses. Your body is here, but your awareness, your presence, you're living in the past, in memory, in accumulated patterns." Kenshin felt anger rise. 45 years of mastery dismissed as mere memory. "Then what would you have me do?" "Put down your sword." "What?" "Lay it on the ground." Kenshin hesitated. The sword was an extension of himself. Putting it down felt like severing his own arm. But he did it. Now, the monk said, "I'm going to attack you, and you're going to forget everything you know." "That's impossible." "Muscle memory, training, I know. That's why this is necessary. The only way to find presence is to first lose all the defenses you've built against it." The monk moved. Not fast, not slow, just moved. Kenshin's body responded automatically. Perfect block, perfect counter, perfect form. "Stop," the monk commanded. "Do you see what happened? I moved and you executed technique. You didn't actually perceive me. You perceived a category, overhead attack, and retrieved the programmed response. You're not fighting me. You're fighting your memory of similar attacks from decades ago. How else would I respond? By being here, by actually seeing me. This moment, this specific movement, by responding to what is, not what your training tells you should be." They continued for an hour. Every time Kenshin relied on training, the monk exposed the gap. Every time Kenshin executed perfect technique, it failed because the situation didn't match the template his mind expected. Finally, exhausted and humiliated, Kenshin stopped. "I don't understand. Are you saying 45 years of training are worthless?" "No. I'm saying 45 years of training have become a cage. Your technique is magnificent, but you've confused technique with truth, form with essence, memory with presence." The monk sat on a nearby rock. "For the next 7 days, I'm going to give you challenges. Each one will require you to abandon something you believe makes you a master. Each one will feel like dying, and each one will be necessary for you to become truly alive." He paused, letting the weight of this settle. "The first challenge for the next 3 days. You are forbidden from teaching your students, forbidden from practicing any technique you know, forbidden from doing anything you've done before. You must approach every moment as if you've never experienced it. That's impossible. I run a dojo. I have responsibilities, then delegate them, or cancel classes. This is more important." "Why would I?" "Because right now, Yamamoto Kenshin, you're not a warrior. You're a very sophisticated ghost, haunting the memory of who you used to be. And ghosts, no matter how perfect their form, are already dead." The words struck deeper than any blade ever had. That night, Kenshin sent word to his senior students, classes suspended for 1 week. Personal training. For 3 days, he tried to follow the monk's instruction, tried to approach each moment with fresh awareness. But 45 years of pattern ran too deep. He woke at dawn same time he'd woken for 40 years. Walked to the dojo same steps, reached for his sword same motion. Every impulse was predetermined. Every choice made by accumulated habit. Without his routines, without his techniques, without his knowledge, who was he? By the third evening, returning to the forest, Kenshin was in crisis. I can't do it, he admitted to the monk. Every moment I try to be present, my training takes over. I've automated myself so completely I can't find spontaneous response anymore. Good, the monk said. Good, you've discovered the problem. That's the first step. He gestured for Kenshin to sit. Let me tell you about mushin, the state of no mind. You know about mushin. That's different from knowing mushin itself. Mushin is when the mind empties of thought, when action flows spontaneously without conscious intention. Perfect textbook answer. Now tell me, have you ever experienced it? Kenshin searched through 45 years of training. Realized, no, never. Every action he'd ever taken was deliberate, controlled, executed with full conscious awareness of technique. He'd never once experienced truly spontaneous response. Because you've spent 45 years building the opposite, the monk explained. You've created a mind so full of technique, strategy, form, protocol there's no space for mushin to arise. You filled the cup so completely with accumulated knowledge that nothing new can enter. Then how do I empty it? You don't. That's the trap. Trying to empty the mind is just another form of control. You stop adding to it. You stop defending it. You let it settle naturally. The monk stood and picked up Kenshin's sword without asking permission, breaking every protocol. He swung it, not in any recognizable form, not following any school's technique. Just swung it, following the natural weight of the blade, the momentum of movement, the shape of space. It was messy, unpredictable, completely unprofessional, and it was the most alive thing Kenshin had seen in decades. You see? The monk said, returning the sword. I don't know Shinkage-ryu. I don't know any form or technique. So when I swing the sword, I'm just swinging the sword. No memory, no comparison, no judgment of correctness, just this moment, this weight, this movement. But that's inefficient, against every principle. Against every principle you've memorized. But is it false? Is it untrue? Or is it just different from what you believe should be true? Kenshin stared at his sword. Had he ever even once in 45 years just swung it without reference to form? Without comparison to ideal? Without judgment of correctness? No. Never. Every movement measured against template. Every action evaluated against standard. He turned himself into a quality control mechanism for adherence to tradition, and in the process stopped being a human being responding to life itself. The fourth challenge. The monk said, is this, tomorrow, spend the entire day doing everything wrong. Deliberately break every rule you've built. Eat at the wrong time. Walk the wrong route. Hold your sword the wrong way. Speak the wrong words. Let yourself be completely improper. Kenshin felt his entire identity rebelling. That's against everything exactly. Which is why it's necessary. You need to discover that the world doesn't end when you're imperfect. That life continues when form is broken. That you, the essential you beneath all the training, survives. When every external structure is removed. That night, Kenshin lay awake, terrified. The monk was asking him to dismantle the architecture of his entire existence. Every structure he'd built, every identity he'd claimed, every defense against chaos. It felt like being asked to die. And maybe, he realized, that's exactly what it was. Section 4, Revolution in the Dojo, 1000 words, day 7. The breaking point. Kenshin woke late, let himself sleep past dawn for the first time in 45 years. The guilt was almost physical, like betraying a sacred oath. He dressed carelessly, didn't bow to his family altar, walked to the forest without his sword, breaking absolute samurai protocol of never being unarmed. Every wrong action felt like tearing off his own skin. At the clearing, the monk waited. How do you feel? He asked. Like I'm dissolving. Like everything that makes me who I am is falling apart. Good, because everything you think makes you who you are is actually just accumulated habit, masquerading as identity. The real you, the one who observes the habits, who experiences life directly, that one is just beginning to emerge. The monk moved to the center of the clearing, Today's challenge is the hardest yet. I'm going to attack you. Really attack you. And you must respond with absolutely no technique, no training, no memory. Just spontaneous response to what is actually happening. Kenshin felt pure fear, unfiltered fear he hadn't felt since being a young student. I'll be killed without technique? You might be. Or you might discover that technique was never what kept you alive. Maybe something deeper did. Something present before all your training. The monk attacked fast, real, dangerous. Kenshin's body responded automatically. Perfect Shinkage-ryu defense. Stop, the monk commanded. Again. Without that, they tried again and again. Each time, Kenshin's training took over. 45 years of muscle memory couldn't just be shut off. Then the monk changed tactics. He created an attack pattern Kenshin had never seen. Something no classical form addressed. Something completely novel. And in that moment of genuine not knowing, something shifted. Kenshin moved, not from technique, not from memory, just moved. His body responded to the actual threat, the actual space, the actual moment. It was messy, inefficient, completely unlike his perfect form, and it worked. For one heartbeat, just one, he'd been present. Truly, completely present. Not executing memory, but responding to reality. Then his mind caught up, tried to analyze what happened, and the moment vanished. But that single heartbeat changed everything. Did you feel it? The monk asked. Yes, for just a moment. I was here. Not remembering being here, actually here. That's Zanshin remaining awareness. Not awareness of technique, but awareness itself. Raw. Direct. Before thought divides it into categories. Kenshin sat heavily on the ground, trembling. I've spent my entire life building perfect discipline, perfect control, perfect technique, and it was all just a defense. A way to avoid ever having to be truly present with the unknown, the uncertainty, the uncontrollable reality of each moment. Yes, then what was it all for? 45 years, 147 duels, thousands of hours of training. Was it all wasted? No, the monk said gently. It brought you here, to this moment where you're finally ready to let it all go and discover what's underneath. Without those 45 years, you wouldn't have a foundation strong enough to withstand its own dissolution. He offered Kenshin his hand. The final challenge. Return to your dojo. Face your students and teach them not what you know, but what you've just discovered. Teach them that mastery isn't the end, it's the place where true learning can finally begin. Kenshin returned to his dojo on day 8. His students knelt in perfect rows. Relieved their master had returned after the unexplained week-long absence, Sensei. Tanaka said with proper respect, "Shall we resume regular training?" Kenshin looked at them, saw himself in their rigid posture, their perfect discipline, their dead eyes. No, he said, "Today we do something different." Confusion rippled through the students. Put away your swords. More confusion. But they obeyed for the next 7 days. I'm going to teach you something no master has ever taught you. I'm going to teach you how to forget everything you know. Over the next week, Kenshin did what the monk had done for him. Created situations where technique failed, where perfect form was useless, where only presence and adaptation could work. He taught them to move without predetermined patterns, to respond to actual circumstances rather than memorized situations, to trust the moment rather than their training. Some students were horrified. This violated everything they understood about the warrior's path. Others, the ones whose spirit hadn't been completely crushed by rigid discipline, felt something awaken. On the 7th day, visiting masters came to observe the famous Yamamoto dojo. They expected perfect synchronization, perfect execution of classical forms. Instead, they saw chaos. Students moving unpredictably, techniques being invented spontaneously, forms being broken and reassembled moment by moment. "Yamamoto-san," one master said with barely disguised contempt, "what has happened to your discipline?" Kenshin bowed respectfully. "I discovered it was killing my students. Now I'm teaching them to be alive. This is not the way of the samurai. Perhaps not the way it's been, but perhaps the way it needs to become. The visiting masters left, scandalized. Word spread through Kyoto, Yamamoto Kenshin had gone mad. The perfect master had abandoned tradition. Enrollment dropped. Lords stopped sending their sons. Other masters publicly criticized his methods. But something else happened. The students who stayed the ones willing to unlearn and transformed. They moved differently, fought differently, carried themselves with a presence that made observers uncomfortable because it was so alive, so unpredictable, so real. They weren't better at executing forms. They were better at being present with what is. One afternoon, a young samurai from a rival school challenged. Kenshin, the young man, was talented, aggressive, full of rigid confidence. That comes from years of discipline. They faced each other. The young samurai attacked with perfect technique, classical overhead strike exactly as textbooks prescribed. Kenshin didn't counter with classical response. He just moved, not from technique, from presence. His body responded to the actual attack, not the category. Overhead strike. But this specific movement in this specific moment by this specific person, his response was unorthodox, unpredictable, completely outside any school's curriculum, and devastatingly effective. The young samurai found himself disarmed without understanding how. What school was that? He asked, confused. No school, Kenshin said. Just this moment. Section 5, the 3-stage path, 1,000 words, 3 years past. Kenshin was 66 now. His dojo had shrunk from 80 students to 20. But those 20 were different from any warriors in Japan. They could still execute perfect technique when needed. But they weren't slaves to it. They could follow form perfectly. But they could also abandon it completely when circumstances demanded. They'd learned what Kenshin learned. True mastery isn't perfect execution. It's perfect adaptation. One autumn morning, a former student returned. One who'd left when Kenshin went mad 3 years prior. Sensei, the man said, bowing. I've trained at 3 other dojos since leaving here. All of them taught me perfect technique. All of them made me a better fighter. He struggled for words. But I feel dead inside, just like I did here 3 years ago. And I remembered that before you changed. You looked the same way, dead inside despite being perfect outside. And now, he paused. Now you look alive even though your technique is less perfect. And you want to learn that? Yes, but I'm afraid. Because learning it seems to require unlearning everything I've built. And I've built so much. I know, Kenshin said gently. That's the terror of it. He gestured for the student to sit. Let me tell you what I've learned in 3 years of unlearning everything. I spent 45 years mastering. Kenshin paused, choosing words carefully because this teaching transcended his own story. Speaking to something universal. The warrior path has been taught wrong for centuries. We've been teaching young men to build perfect discipline, perfect control, perfect technique. We've told them this is mastery. But it's not. It's just stage 1. The former student leaned forward, listening intently. Stage 1 is necessary. You need foundation. You need technique. You need discipline. Without it, you're just chaos. You must learn the forms. Master the basics. Build the structure. This takes years, sometimes decades. Most people never get past this stage. They spend their entire lives still trying to perfect fundamentals. Kenshin stood. Walked to the dojo wall where weapons hung in careful arrangement. And this is what no one tells you. Stage 1 is just preparation for stage 2. Stage 2 is learning that everything you built in stage 1 can become your prison. That perfect discipline can make you rigid. That complete control can make you unable to adapt. That flawless technique can make you predictable and therefore defeatable. Stage 2 is the crisis, the breakdown. The moment when mastery itself becomes the obstacle. He turned back to face his former student. Most warriors never reach stage 2 because they can't bear the death of stage 1. They can't survive the dissolution of everything they've built. They'd rather live as perfect but dead masters than risk the chaos of becoming students again. But there's a stage 3. The former student waited. Sensing this was the heart of the teaching. Stage 3 true mastery is learning when to use what you built and when to abandon it completely. It's holding discipline lightly enough to let it go when presence demands it. It's being so secure in your technique that you can forget it entirely. When the moment requires something unprecedented, Kenshin sat across from his former student. Stage 3 is the paradox. You must master form to transcend form. You must achieve perfect discipline to discover freedom beyond discipline. You must become an expert to rediscover beginner's mind. This is Zanshin, the awareness that remains when all technique dissolves. Raw presence before thought categorizes it. The dojo was quiet except for the sound of wind moving through cherry trees outside. The danger, Kenshin continued, is stopping at stage 1 and calling it mastery. Living your entire life inside the cage you built for protection. Never discovering the freedom that exists beyond perfect control. He looked directly into his former student's eyes. I see that fear in you now. The same fear I felt 3 years ago. The fear of losing everything you've worked for. But here's the secret. The death is not real. What dies is only the identity you built around the discipline. The discipline itself, when you need it, remains. You just stop being enslaved to it. You gain the ability to use it consciously rather than being used by it unconsciously. The former student sat with this teaching, feeling its weight. Sensei, I want to train here again, but differently this time. Good, Kenshin said. Then let's begin by forgetting everything you know. Universal Wisdom segment. As weeks passed and Kenshin worked with his returning student, he found himself reflecting on something larger than martial arts. This teaching, this paradox of mastery, extended far beyond swordsmanship. Everywhere in life, people build perfect systems, perfect routines, perfect disciplines. They optimize, automate, control. They create structures to protect themselves from chaos, uncertainty, vulnerability. And those structures work for a while, until the day comes when the structure itself becomes the prison. When perfect discipline creates perfect death. When complete control eliminates the possibility of spontaneous joy. When flawless execution replaces authentic presence, this moment arrives for everyone eventually. The business executive whose perfect productivity system has automated all meaning from their work. The artist whose technical mastery has killed creative spontaneity. The parent whose perfect parenting methods have created emotional distance from their children. The spiritual seeker whose perfect meditation practice has become another form of control. The moment when you realize, everything I've mastered is exactly what's destroying me, and in that moment, you face the same choice Kenshin faced. Do you defend your cage, or do you risk its destruction? Most choose defense. It's safer, more socially rewarded, easier to maintain than transform. But a few, the ones willing to risk everything, choose dissolution. They become students again. They embrace not knowing. They let perfect structures crack open to reveal something more alive underneath. This is not a path for everyone. It's uncomfortable, uncertain. There are no guaranteed outcomes. But for those who feel the deadness of their own perfection, who recognize the prison of their own discipline, who sense that true mastery lies beyond, rather than within their accumulated knowledge, this path exists. 3 stages. Build mastery. Discover it's a prison. Learn to hold it lightly enough to transcend it. 8 years after his awakening, Kenshin was 69 years old. He'd lived longer than most samurai who fought in the wars, and he'd discovered something profound. The real war wasn't on battlefields. It was in the mind, the battle between control and presence, between accumulated knowledge and direct experience, between the safety of mastery and the risk of perpetual beginner's mind. His small dojo had become known not for producing the most disciplined warriors, but for creating the most adaptable ones. Students came from across Japan, drawn by rumors of the master who taught anti-teaching, the practice of unlearning. One autumn evening, Kenshin sat with the wandering monk who'd started all this 8 years ago. Did you know, Kenshin asked, when you approached me that first time, that I would transform? No. I only knew you were ready to be asked the question. Whether you'd answer it, that was never certain. What question? The one every master must face. Are you more committed to your identity as a master or to discovering truth? Most choose identity. It's safer, more comfortable, more socially rewarded, and I chose truth. You chose to at least be willing to let identity dissolve. That willingness, that's what opened everything. Kenshin smiled. I tell my students now, perfect discipline is just the beginning. Real mastery is learning when discipline itself is the obstacle. And what do they say? Some think I'm insane. Some are terrified. And some, he gestured to students training nearby, moving with unpredictable grace, some understand. Those are the ones who become truly dangerous, because they have both discipline and freedom, both structure and adaptability, both form and formlessness. The monk stood to leave. My work here is done. You've learned what you needed. Will I see you again? Perhaps. If you forget all this and need to be reminded, the monk's eyes twinkled. The danger of mastering unlearning is thinking you've mastered it. The moment you believe you've arrived, you've become rigid again. The path is practicing beginner's mind forever. After the monk left, Kenshin sat alone as stars emerged in the darkening sky. He thought about his journey, from perfect master to confused, student to something that couldn't be named. He'd learned that true strength isn't rigidity, it's flexibility. True. Discipline isn't control, it's presence. True. Mastery isn't perfection, it's endless. Willingness to be a beginner. A young student approached, one who'd arrived just that week. Sensei, I don't understand your teaching. It seems to contradict itself. You say build discipline, then abandon it. Follow form, then break it. Master technique, then forget it. How can all these contradictions be true? Kenshin smiled. They can't be. That's the point. Truth lives in the space between the contradictions, not in choosing one side over the other. I still don't understand. Good. That's the perfect place to begin. Come back tomorrow. We'll start your training by teaching you everything wrong. The student bowed and left, more confused than ever. Kenshin sat alone in his dojo, surrounded by weapons that had tasted blood in 147 duels, surrounded by a legacy of unlearning that would confuse scholars for centuries, surrounded by the paradox of his entire life. He'd become a master by forgetting how to be one. He'd found presence by abandoning perfect control. He'd discovered life by allowing his perfect discipline to die. And somewhere in that death, in that dissolution, in that terrifying loss of everything he'd built, he'd found something no technique could teach, no tradition could preserve, no discipline could capture. The raw, alive, present moment itself, before thought, before category, before the mind's insistence on making everything fit into known patterns. Just this, just here, just now. The old master closed his eyes and breathed. No special technique, no perfect posture, just breathing, and in that simple act, he was more powerfully present than 45 years of perfect discipline had ever made him. This is the way beyond. Mastery, the path that begins where achievement ends. The warrior, who is truly dangerous because they have nothing left to defend. Walk it carefully, or don't walk it carefully. Both are fine, because the ultimate teaching is this: there is no ultimate teaching, only endless presence with what is.